You've moved on from your past, only to find out that your past hasn't moved on from you. In this video, I'm sharing 3 disturbing ex-horror stories that will make you question how well you really know the people you once trusted. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to hear might just change how you see your own past relationships forever. It had been nearly 2 years since I broke up with Jess. The relationship had been intense, to say the least, but it ended badly. Jess became possessive, paranoid, and downright scary toward the end. I remember the day I walked out of her apartment for the last time, feeling like I had escaped something toxic, something dangerous. I blocked her on all social media, changed my number, and even moved to a different part of town to start fresh. The first few months after the breakup were rough. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting her to appear out of nowhere. But as time passed, the paranoia subsided, and I finally felt like I was getting my life back. One evening I came home from work, tossed my keys on the kitchen counter, and noticed something strange. There was a faint scent in the air, a familiar perfume that I hadn't smelled in a long time. Jess's perfume. My stomach dropped. I quickly dismissed it, thinking maybe I had come across someone at work wearing a similar scent, but deep down I couldn't shake the unease. A few days later, I started noticing more unsettling things around my apartment. My neatly arranged books on the shelf were suddenly out of order, and a few of my clothes had been moved from the closet. I began to wonder if I was imagining things, but the changes were too deliberate to be accidents. One night, as I lay in bed trying to fall asleep, I heard a faint rustling sound coming from the living room. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to hear. The noise stopped abruptly, and I thought maybe it was just the wind. But then it happened again. A slow, deliberate shuffling, like someone moving cautiously through the dark. I grabbed a baseball bat I kept under my bed and quietly crept toward the living room. The apartment was pitch black, and the only light came from the street lamp outside, casting eerie shadows through the windows. As I reached the doorway, I saw a figure standing in the middle of the room, partially obscured by darkness. My breath caught in my throat. I could barely make out the shape, but I knew who it was before she even spoke. "Why did you leave me, Alex?" Jess's voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it sent chills down my spine. I flicked on the light, and there she was, standing in my living room, holding one of my shirts to her chest like it was some kind of trophy. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and filled with a mixture of sadness and something darker: obsession. "How did you get in here?" I demanded, trying to sound more confident than I felt. She didn't answer. Instead, she just stared at me, as if trying to figure out how I could ask such a question. Then she started to laugh, a quiet, unsettling giggle that grew louder and more hysterical by the second. "I never really left," she said, her laughter abruptly stopping. "I've been here the whole time watching you." Panic set in. How long had she been stalking me? How many times had she slipped into my apartment without me knowing? I realized with horror that the strange scent, the rearranged items, the shuffling at night, it had all been her. "I'm calling the police," I said, backing away toward my phone. Jess's expression changed in an instant. The laughter was gone, replaced by a cold, menacing glare. She dropped the shirt and took a step toward me. "You think you can just get rid of me that easily?" she hissed. "We were meant to be together, Alex. Forever." I didn't wait to hear more. I bolted for the door, but she was faster. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin as she tried to pull me back. In a surge of adrenaline, I managed to break free and dash out into the hallway. I heard her scream behind me, a guttural, animalistic sound that echoed in my ears as I ran down the stairs. I didn't stop running until I reached the lobby and burst through the front door into the street. My heart was racing and my hands were trembling as I called the police. They arrived quickly, but by the time they searched my apartment, Jess was gone. The officers took my statement, and I gave them as much information as I could. But there was no sign of forced entry, and without more evidence, there wasn't much they could do. I moved out the next day. I didn't feel safe in that apartment anymore, knowing that Jess had been able to come and go as she pleased. I stayed with a friend for a few weeks until I found a new place, constantly looking over my shoulder, half expecting her to find me again. Months went by, and I tried to put the incident behind me, but every now and then I would get a strange feeling like someone was watching me. I'd see a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye or hear a familiar giggle in a crowded place. But when I turned around, no one was there. I never saw Jess again after that night, but I could never shake the feeling that she was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to come back into my life. And whenever I catch a whiff of her perfume, my heart still skips a beat, and I wonder if this time she'll finally make good on her promise to never let me go. After my last breakup, I was done with relationships for a while. I had thrown myself into work, determined to get my life back on track. Things were finally starting to feel normal again, and I was even beginning to enjoy the single life. But then, strange things started happening that made me realize someone wasn't quite ready to let me go. It began with the phone calls, always from a blocked number. At first I thought it was just a telemarketer, so I ignored them. But the calls kept coming, every day at the same time, around 10 p.m. Sometimes I'd answer, and there would be nothing but silence on the other end. Other times I'd hear faint breathing before the line went dead. It was unnerving, but I tried to brush it off. One night, after the usual call, I received a text message from an unknown number. The message was short. "I see you." My heart raced as I stared at the screen. I quickly texted back, asking who it was, but received no response. I convinced myself it was just a prank, someone trying to mess with me, but the message stayed in the back of my mind, gnawing at me. A few days later, I started noticing strange things around my apartment. I'd come home from work to find the front door unlocked, even though I was sure I'd locked it before leaving. Other times I'd find items slightly out of place, like my coffee mug being on the wrong shelf or my shoes lined up perfectly by the door when I distinctly remembered leaving them scattered. The final straw came one night when I was watching TV in my living room. The show I was watching abruptly cut off, replaced by a black screen. Then, a video started playing, grainy and shaky, like it had been filmed with an old camcorder. The camera was pointed at my apartment building, zooming in on my living room window. The timestamp in the corner of the screen was from just a few minutes earlier. I felt a cold sweat break out as I realized the video was live. Someone was outside my building, watching me right at that moment. I jumped up and ran to the window, throwing it open to look outside. The street was empty, no sign of anyone filming. But as I stood there, I heard my phone buzz with a new text message. "You shouldn't have done that." Panic set in. I called the police, trying to explain what was happening. They sent a patrol car to check the area, but by the time the officers arrived, whoever had been watching me was long gone. They took a report, but without more evidence, there wasn't much they could do. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and paranoia. I started staying late at work, avoiding going home until I was exhausted enough to fall asleep immediately. I even bought new locks and installed a security camera at my front door, but the sense of being watched never went away. One evening, as I sat at my desk in the office, I received another text message from the same unknown number. This time, it was a photo of me, sitting at my desk just as I was at that moment. My blood ran cold as I realized the photo had been taken from outside the office window, only a few feet away. I shot out of my chair and rushed to the window, my heart pounding in my chest. But just like before, the street was empty and there was no sign of anyone nearby. I quickly closed the blinds and called the police again, but they found nothing when they arrived. The situation escalated the next night. I was in my kitchen making dinner when I heard a noise coming from the living room. It was the sound of my front door creaking open. I grabbed a knife from the counter and cautiously made my way to the living room, my heart racing. The door was ajar, swaying slightly as if it had just been opened. My hand shook as I pushed it fully open, expecting to find someone standing there. But the hallway was empty, and there was no sign of anyone inside. I stepped back into the apartment, my mind racing with possibilities. Then the lights went out. I froze, gripping the knife tighter, listening to the deafening silence that filled the room. My phone buzzed again, and I fumbled to pull it out of my pocket. Another text. "I'm inside." My blood turned to ice. I spun around, trying to see anything in the darkness, but it was too late. I felt a presence behind me, a cold breath on the back of my neck, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the floor of my living room, the knife still clutched in my hand. The lights were back on, and the front door was closed. I stumbled to my feet, disoriented and terrified. My phone was lying on the coffee table with one final text message on the screen. "You're never alone." I packed a bag and left that night, moving in with a friend while I looked for a new place. I never found out who was stalking me or how they managed to get into my apartment. The police continued to investigate, but they came up empty-handed. To this day, I still have nightmares about that night, waking up in a cold sweat feeling like someone is watching me. I've changed my number, moved to a new city, and cut all ties with my past, but the fear never truly goes away. I'll never forget the feeling of being hunted, of knowing that someone out there was obsessed with me, someone who could strike at any moment. Breakups are never easy, but mine with Amber Sykes was something else entirely. We'd been together for almost 3 years, and things had been good, until they weren't. Our relationship started to sour, and the love we once had turned into resentment. It was mutual. We both knew it was time to move on. Or so I thought. After the breakup, I thought I'd have some peace, a chance to focus on myself and heal. But Amber had other plans. At first, it was just constant messages, texts, calls, emails. She'd swing between begging me to come back and cursing me for leaving. I tried to block her, but she'd find new numbers or make fake accounts to reach out to me. It was annoying, but I figured she'd get tired of it eventually. She didn't. One night, a few weeks after the breakup, I was lying in bed when I heard a tapping sound on my window. My bedroom was on the second floor, so I assumed it was just the wind or some branches brushing against the glass. But the tapping continued, rhythmic and deliberate. I got up to check it out, pulling back the curtain just a bit to peek outside. What I saw made my blood run cold. There was Amber, standing on the roof of the porch, right outside my window, her face inches from the glass. Her eyes were wide and wild, her hair hanging in tangled strands around her face. She had this crazed look, one that I had never seen before, even during our worst fights. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the edge of my bed. She started pounding on the window harder and harder, her face twisted in anger. I could hear her yelling something, but the window muffled the sound. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type. While waiting for the police, I watched as Amber continued to pound on the window, screaming obscenities at me. Her voice was shrill and frantic, but the words were mostly incoherent. She wasn't making any sense, like she was in some sort of frenzy. I was terrified that the glass would shatter under the force of her blows, and she'd come crashing into the room. The police arrived quickly, and I heard them shouting from the front yard. Amber finally stopped her assault on the window and turned to look down at the officers. For a moment, she just stood there, completely still, like a statue. Then, without a word, she jumped off the roof. I ran to the window, fearing the worst, but she had landed on the porch below and took off running into the night. The police gave chase, but they didn't catch her. They took my statement, and I told them everything that had been happening. They promised to look for her and suggested I get a restraining order. I agreed, but it didn't make me feel any safer. The next few days were quiet, and I started to think maybe Amber had finally snapped out of it and was getting help. But that hope was shattered when I came home from work one evening to find my front door wide open. My stomach dropped as I stepped inside, calling out to see if anyone was there. The house was silent, but I could feel that something was off. I walked through the house, checking each room. Everything seemed normal until I got to the bedroom. That's where I found the note scrawled in lipstick on my mirror. "You're mine forever." My heart raced as I scanned the room, looking for any sign that she was still there. But I was alone. I called the police again, but by the time they arrived, there was no trace of Amber. They searched the house and the surrounding area, but she was gone. They assured me they'd keep looking, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. To them, it was just another case of an ex who couldn't let go. But I knew it was more than that. Amber wasn't just heartbroken. She was dangerous. I decided to stay with a friend for a while, hoping that putting some distance between us would make Amber lose interest. But even that didn't stop her. She started sending me photos. Pictures of me walking to work, sitting in my car, even sleeping. It was like she was always watching, always just out of sight. One night, I was staying at my friend's place when I got another photo. This one was different. It was a picture of my friend's house taken from the outside, and in the corner of the frame, I could see a shadowy figure standing by the window. I realized with horror that it was Amber, and she was watching us right at that moment. We called the police, but by the time they arrived, Amber had vanished again. My friend was freaked out, understandably, and I knew I couldn't keep putting them in danger. I had to do something to end this nightmare. I decided to confront Amber, to try and reason with her. I sent her a message, asking to meet at a public place. To my surprise, she agreed. We met at a coffee shop in the middle of the day, surrounded by people. I tried to keep my voice calm as I told her that what she was doing was scaring me, that she needed to stop. But Amber just smiled, a cold, twisted smile that sent chills down my spine. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice eerily calm. "We're meant to be together. No one else will have you. Ever." I realized then that there was no reasoning with her. She was too far gone. I got up to leave, but as I did, she grabbed my arm, her grip like a vice. "If I can't have you," she whispered, "then no one can." I managed to pull away and rushed out of the coffee shop, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I couldn't keep living like this, in constant fear of what Amber might do next. I needed to find a way to protect myself, to end this once and for all. I decided to move to a new city, somewhere far away where Amber wouldn't be able to find me. I changed my number, deleted all my social media, and started over. For a while, it seemed to work. I didn't hear from Amber, and I began to feel safe again. But every now and then, I still get the feeling that I'm being watched, that someone is following me. I'll catch a glimpse of a shadow out of the corner of my eye, or hear footsteps behind me when I'm walking alone at night. I don't know if it's just paranoia or if Amber is still out there waiting for the right moment to strike. All I know is that I'll never truly be free from her. She's out there somewhere, and as long as she is, I'll never be safe. I'll always be looking over my shoulder, waiting for the day when she finally comes back to claim what she thinks is hers.